Today, we're diving into a really fascinating Supreme Court case where billions of dollars were on the line for American hospitals. It's this wild story about a super complex law, a high-stakes math problem, and, believe it or not, how everything came down to the meaning of just 4 words. I mean, how is that even possible, right? How can one tiny phrase buried in some dense federal rulebook create a multi-billion-dollar question that goes all the way to the Supreme Court? Well, let's follow the money and see how it all unfolded. All right, first things first, we have to get our heads around the problem that Congress was trying to fix in the first place. And it all starts with this really fundamental challenge in healthcare. You see, it's a well-documented fact. Hospitals that serve a lot of low-income patients just face higher costs. Research shows these patients often come in with more complex health problems, and they need more resources. So at the end of the day, it's just more expensive to treat them. So to deal with this imbalance, Congress created something called the Disproportionate Share Hospital Adjustment. We'll just call it DSH. You can think of it like a financial boost. It's extra money from the government to help these specific hospitals cover those higher costs and, to make sure they keep serving the communities that need them most. But of course, to hand out that money, the government needs a way to figure out which hospitals get it and exactly how much they should get. And that, my friends, is where we get to the heart of this whole thing. A really crucial, and as it turns out, very controversial math problem. The key to the whole DSH payment system is this formula. It's called the Medicare fraction, and it's basically designed to measure one thing: what percentage of a hospital's Medicare patients are also considered low income. Now, when you first look at it, the formula seems pretty straightforward. The bottom number, the denominator, that's just the total number of days for all of a hospital's Medicare patients. Simple enough. But the top number, the numerator, that's where the fight is. That number is supposed to be the patient days for only the low-income Medicare patients. So here's what you've got to understand. The bigger that top number is, the bigger the whole fraction gets, and the more DSH money a hospital receives. So absolutely everything hinges on who exactly gets counted as low income and gets put into that numerator. And this is what brings us to the 4 words at the heart of the legal battle. You see, the law doesn't just say low income. It's way more specific. It says patients who are entitled to supplementary security income benefits. How you read those 4 words changes everything. And believe me, that single phrase kicked off a huge legal war between hundreds of hospitals on one side and the federal government on the other, each with a totally different idea of what it meant. So here's the breakdown. The hospitals argued for a really wide interpretation. They said entitled to benefits should mean anyone who is simply enrolled in the SSI system. Cast a wide net. But the government pushed for a much, much narrower view. They said no, it should only count patients who were actually eligible to get a cash payment from SSI for the specific month they were in the hospital. And that's a huge difference, because you can be enrolled in SSI but not get a check one month for all sorts of reasons. Justice Jackson, in her dissent, just summed up the hospital's point of view perfectly. She basically said, look, the whole reason the formula uses SSI is to tap into this existing list of people who are already officially designated as our society's neediest. It's not about whether they got a check in March, it's about their overall status as being financially vulnerable. So after years and years of fighting this out in lower courts, the case finally landed at the Supreme Court. So how did the 9 justices rule on what those 4 little words actually mean? Well, the decision was pretty decisive. It wasn't even close. By a vote of 7-2, the court sided with the government and its narrower interpretation. The majority opinion, which was written by Justice Barrett, made it crystal clear. They held that to be entitled to SSI benefits for this formula, a patient had to have been eligible to receive an actual SSI cash payment during the specific month they were in the hospital. So how did they get there? Well, the court's logic was pretty straightforward, like a 3-step process. First, they looked at the law for SSI itself and said, okay, the benefits here are defined as cash payments. Step 2, they noted that the law makes it clear that your eligibility for that cash is decided on a month-to-month basis. So step 3, it logically follows that being entitled to benefits must mean being eligible for that specific monthly cash payment. But wait a minute, the hospitals had what they thought was a killer counterargument. They pointed to another case from just a few years back, Empire Health, where the court seemed to rule the exact opposite way on a very similar sounding phrase. They basically said, hey, you can't have it both ways. So how did the court square that circle?
The court's answer was basically, you're comparing apples and oranges. They drew this really sharp line between the two government programs. They said Medicare Part A, the program in that older case, is an insurance program. Your entitlement is broad, it's ongoing, like an insurance policy that's always active. But SSI, they said, that's a welfare program. It gives out cash based on your situation that can change every single month. The very nature of the benefit is different.
And Justice Barrett spelled it out right there in the opinion. She said, look, we're not being inconsistent, we're just being very specific. The decision in Empire Health was all about how Medicare Part A works. This case is all about how SSI benefits work. What's true for one isn't automatically true for the other. Okay, so we've been pretty deep in the legal weeds here. What does this highly technical ruling actually mean in the real world? What are the ripple effects? Well, the most direct and immediate impact is all about the money. The government's narrow definition is now the law of the land. And that means that for this one specific formula, hospitals serving the poor are going to have fewer patients counted in that all-important numerator. And ultimately, they'll get less federal funding than they would have otherwise.
But you know, the decision also tells us something bigger about how the Supreme Court sees its own job. Justice Barrett basically said that even if Congress's goal was to help these hospitals, it's not the court's job to rewrite the law to make it perfect. Their duty is to read the specific words on the page, to respect the exact formula that Congress actually wrote down.
And that leaves us with one last pretty big question. This whole case is a powerful reminder of how just a few words buried deep inside a complex law can have massive real-world consequences. It really makes you ask, when our laws are this technical, who's the one that ultimately bears the cost of a single disputed phrase?